Hey everybody, welcome to the Blendr Report, where news meets rational thinking. I'm your host, Jonathan Harvey. This is your co-host, Liam de Boer. Liam, what are we talking about today?
Today, we're going to be chatting about the Liberals being expected to call a Canadian federal election for April 28th, Mark Carney's chief of staff ignoring CSIS warnings about Chinese election interference, China executing 4 Canadian citizens while the government responds with spineless diplomacy, the Liberal Party's bait and switch on climate policy, Trudeau's $8.4 million pension highlighting the need for accountability in political compensation, as well as John Stuart Mill's vision for liberty. All right, let's get started. So first off, we've got Canada's election battle, Carney versus Poilievre in the shadow of Trump. Prime Minister Mark Carney is expected to call a snap election for April 28th, with the campaign centered on Donald Trump's trade war and rhetoric about making Canada the 51st state. The Liberals and Conservatives are in a tight race, with both parties proposing economic strategies to counter U.S. tariffs. Trump's preference for Carney over Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has fueled criticism, with Poilievre accusing Carney of weak leadership. The Liberals have recruited high-profile candidates, while Carney's past role at Brookfield Asset Management has drawn scrutiny. The election is expected to be a referendum on Canada's handling of U.S. relations. So, does calling a snap election benefit the Liberals or Conservatives more?
Well, obviously the Liberals, or they wouldn't call it, right? Because they would have taken the next several months, 6-7 months to October to rebuild the Liberal brand. So obviously this is what they want. You know, they've framed Poilievre as the Canuck Trump, right? And honestly, like, I applaud them for it, because politics is a game of chess and war and strategy, and this is the right move for them if they want to hang on to power. Do I like them? No. Do I agree with them? No. Do I think he's the Canuck Trump? No. But I can certainly appreciate their approach. It is the right move, because if you think about it, I was kind of processing this the other day. If you think about where the Liberal Party is currently at, and then where Canada's currently at, things are only going to get worse here for the next 6, 7, 8 months, probably for a lot longer, but that's when the October election will be, right? So you kind of consider that and you go, okay, so even if they took time to rebuild their Liberal brand, but Canada got worse and worse and worse, well, they're wearing that. And not only are they wearing it under Trudeau's reign, now it's under Carney for the next 6, 7 months. How do they possibly go to the Canadians and go, we're the solution for you? For me, there's no question they got to call this election as soon as possible. I think even without the Trump rhetoric, they would have had to do it because of what I just explained. But with it, they've done a really, really good job of putting him on his heels and making him seem like he is going to be sort of this, Republican response for Canadians, which they don't want, because apparently Trump's going to take over Canada and all these tariffs. So but here's the issue. Poilievre's been sitting on the sidelines doing fuck all. He's just been letting this happen, right? You actually said this the other day, and I wrote it and used it in one of my rants. Napoleon had this saying that I'll butcher a little bit, but basically, if your enemy is sinking his own ship, don't get involved. Let him continue. And Trudeau was doing a great job, a one-man wrecking ball. Let him do his thing. So it served Poilievre to stand back, make comments here and there, have some policy ideas, maybe some catchy slogans, which honestly I don't really care for, but anyway. And then just let him sink his own ship. But the Liberal Party changed their strategy, and now they have Mark Carney. And now Mark Carney is back in the ring fighting. So Poilievre can't continue shadowboxing. He's got to jump back in the ring and actually execute. And I just think that he's been sort of sitting on his hands a little bit. Maybe they're not sure what to do. Maybe they just were not having any positive responses from the media, and they're like, fuck, if we say anything, we're just making it worse. I don't know. But he's got to do something, because what's happening right now is not working well for him. And, I put out a video the other day, yesterday, about the election, the polling results. And this was actually kind of shocking to me. Sure, they're polls, and you and I take every poll with a grain of salt. Now, they say they're off by 3%, whatever. Cool. Now, I looked at the poll. This was a National Post, which is relatively right-wing for Canada news. I looked at one that was done by True North as well. They're definitely right-wing. And they only had the Conservatives up by 2 points. So this is a bit of a cause for concern. We are not America. This is not Kamala Harris exactly the same, because down there, they don't have equal representation in their media, but there is Republican representation significantly. We don't have any of that here. So whatever the Liberals are saying about Poilievre and the Conservatives, well, that's it. That's the story for a lot of people. So my problem is that a lot of people in the comment section, when I put out this video saying, hey, here's what's happening in the polls, here's what Poilievre has to do, here's kind of a 5-point strategy. People are like, oh, the polls are bullshit. No, it's nonsense, whatever. It's like, hey, maybe they are bullshit, but the tide is turning. We don't look like we're going to steamroll to a supermajority anymore. Now what it looks like is we might win a minority. Maybe we win a majority. I don't know. But the response isn't to say polls are bullshit. The response is to get out and do something about it. The response is to be vocal. The response is to spread, more of the conservative ideas you'd like to see in society and not just sit on your hands like the polls don't matter at all. It's a signpost to get your ass in gear and do something. I think that was kind of my perspective. Now, Trump's endorsement of Carney, I think that was tactical, and obviously that hurts the liberals, but which is good because they've really been leveraging that against the conservatives. So I'm kind of happy to see that. But what's interesting is I don't even know if Trump's being honest or not, because if Trump actually wants to annex the country, the liberals are a better choice for him. Now, if he would prefer to have better trade volume and more energy, then the conservatives are a good option. So I don't actually know where he's at with that, but that's kind of my take.
Yeah, I agree. It depends on how serious he is with the annexation stuff, because if he is wanting to actually turn Canada into the 51st state and this isn't just constant trolling, then, and don't get me wrong, I think he wants to exert influence over Canada,
yes.
But whether full annexation is his ultimate goal, I don't know. However, yeah, if that is what he wants, then the liberals, for sure, because you look at that and you go, okay, Canada's one big leverage point is our natural resources. In the liberals, like Trudeau stood on the stage in front of the World Economic Forum in 2016 and said, I don't want Canada to be known for its resources anymore. I want it to be known for our resourcefulness.
He's an idiot. He's such an idiot.
Ridiculous. But it shows the mentality of these people where he goes,
yes.
Yeah. And so,
and we know Carney was doing a lot of the puppeting. So yeah, I totally agree.
Exactly. So if you're Trump in that sense and you go, okay, they aren't even going to use their biggest weapon.
Yeah, like they got a gun and they're going to try to stab me with that knife?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll fight that guy.
With the plastic takeout knife.
Well, I have a bazooka.
Sorry, the liberals don't let you sell plastic anymore. But I do think, if Trump, say, is more serious about taking on China and this international order with a partner, then I do think Poilievre would be the obvious choice in that. However, who knows? Maybe he's also sitting there going, like, I don't see anything in Canada to make me believe that these people will take it serious, the China threat seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if I had to guess, I would say that he is pivoting and endorsing Carney because he did not mean to see he didn't mean to have Poilievre and the conservatives tank so much. And I think that this is his tactic to try to rebuild some conservative momentum and squash the liberals. That's what I think. That's what I think makes the most sense. Because if you think about ease of application, think about like how easy it will be to get what you want or to get something valuable out of Canada. If you fight with the liberals and you want to eventually annex the country, that's still going to be a slow burn. And China is going to be at your back door, right? Like that's what's going to happen. They're already here. A, we already know that. And B, there's no way that we're just going to fail and just let him take us over in 4 years. That would be a 5-10 years. And you and I had this conversation too. We think that this is mainly about a military strategy, being able to have basically call it an Iron Dome for lack of a better term. You know what I mean? Some sort of military strength from the Arctic down to the Panama Canal. That seems to be what Steve Bannon was talking about. So if you think about that, if that's his strategy, you're not going to get that with the liberals here. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get military in here. There's just no way. They're going to fight him kicking and screaming because if the liberals win on an anti-Trump message, they have to maintain their anti-Trump message, and that's how they're going to maintain support. It's like they're fucking CNN, right? They're going to go, everybody hates Trump, and every time something bad happens, they're going to go, well, that guy's like Trump, and they're going to use it for the next 4 or 5 years if they get in. So when I kind of back into it, and then you think about the conservatives, and you go, well, if I had them on board, we could leverage more natural resources, we could fight back against China, we could actually probably have a better opportunity for that military alliance. So I think he's doing it primarily to give the conservative support. That's my guess.
Yeah, I agree. But circling back around to the whole conversation about who does this benefit, the liberals or the conservatives, I don't know if it really, like a shotgun election, quick snap, necessarily benefits the liberals more than it's that not doing it right now would harm them, because it just keeps more and more of this anti-Carney pressure that I do think will come around. That they go, we have to call this before the grift is known, essentially. Yeah.
But I think that's the same thing almost, though, because then it does benefit them now. Like because if you say who does it benefit more, well, it really doesn't benefit the conservatives. But if you waited, that would benefit the conservatives. So I think we're kind of saying a bit of the same thing. But Also, I think it shows strength to be like, new leader, you have to vote me in now. Everybody says I'm unelected. Cool. Now's your opportunity. Knowing that. So I think it's twofold. I think it shows that he's confident. Canadians, everyone's like, oh, he's a statesman. He's been a banker. He's so confident. No, he's a douche. But that's how this is going to come off if you pay attention to the mainstream media, right? So I think, anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I do think it is actually more so for their benefit.
No, but and again, I don't disagree with what you're saying, but just more so, the way that I'm looking at it is like calling it right now doesn't necessarily give them a big positive push as much as it doesn't, that doing the alternative would hurt them.
Yeah. Right now they're on a tightrope, and if you give them another 6-7 months, they're definitely falling off.
And so I think the most interesting thing throughout this is going to be seeing the debates and how what the conversation of the debates is itself, because that's largely what the debate is. And I think, I don't know, like I do, especially over the last few months, seeing how he hasn't really had a backbone, I do worry that, okay, look at the debate topics for our last election. It was like truth and reconciliation. It was climate change. It was vaccine mandate or COVID response. Or there was like 2 other that I can't really remember, but there was 5 topics. But all 5 of those were the political equivalent of home territory for like a sports team. They're like, these are our topics.
Yes.
And so the topics themselves are the debate. And we know that, again, the Liberals have, and the power brokers within this circle have immense control over things like the CBC or all these other news networks that are likely to be the ones hosting it. So you know that they are going to sway it in that favor of them. But I really hope that, and again, I haven't really seen much to make me think this, but I do hope that Poilievre comes out swinging, and if those are the topics of this election, that he just breaks them. Like, let's say they bring up climate change again. If he at all tries to toe the line of being like, this is how I'm going to tackle climate change, his position needs to be, this is not our priority right now.
Yes, I agree. So the main 5, I can tell you what they are. Economy is number 1, and right now, Carney's favored 45-31 over Poilievre. Number 2 is U.S. relations, and Carney is favored 42-29 over Poilievre. Third on the list, I don't think the climate change one is in the right order, but this was just a Carney favored one. Is climate change, and that's 40-13 favored to Carney. And now Poilievre is winning by 5 points on affordability and spending cuts. So those are kind of the space that we're in primarily. So I think really it boils down to economics and how you're going to handle the U.S. I think that's really what this is, and things that are going to branch off from that, from those sort of macro topics.
I think the big silver lining here is that it doesn't look like Carney can handle himself when the pressure's on and he's in a. Yeah, again, they will manipulate it a little bit, but when you've got an opponent like Poilievre standing across from you that's willing to call you out,
he's great on the spot. Yeah.
He's definitely sharp. He's well-spoken, but I do think he is starting to lack substance a little bit.
I don't think he is necessarily. I think the situations lacked the necessity for substance in most cases. Like, where has he been? Where is the opportunity he had to show substance, but he didn't? He fell short. I think he's just in a lot of scenarios where he's not getting the opportunity for that more long format. Here's the information, which is the big problem with mainstream media, with all this nonsense, right? When you don't have any right-wing outlets, no one knows his policy strategy. He's got to put it into sound bites, or he's got to rip a guy while he's eating an apple. That's the thing that kind of goes viral. He should be, like, honestly, on our podcast, doing more shows.
He should be doing alternative media.
Because the thing is, we know that that's what worked well for Trump, and we know, hey, look, it's not quite the same landscape here. I understand that. You know, you and I do reasonably well considering the reach we have. But there are a lot of other ones he can get on. He was on Candace Malcolm's show not too long ago too, right? Like, you got to keep doing those things. It would serve him well to try to go down to the States, though, if I'm being honest. Get on Joe Rogan. Because Rogan does nothing but rip the libs. And what I like about Rogan is he was a liberal for a very long time. And he still has a lot of, his foundation is social responsibility. He really is still there, right? So if he got down there and spoke with him, I think that would do a lot for his campaign. But he's honest, he's sitting on his hands. I just don't understand it.
But yeah, I think where I was leading to with this as well is you do see Carney in these situations. So again, against somebody like Poilievre, who has been even I think they can be a little bit high school drama-esque of these question periods in Parliament.
For sure.
But he's used to sparring where
Yes.
Carney isn't.
No.
Carney has not been in that position. And so you listen to him in these scenarios where he can't think quickly on his feet, and it's painful.
Yeah, that's such an underrated skill.
You will have a call with President Trump in the coming days. What are your expectations for the president in that call?
I think, let me say a few things. The first is that the President of the United States, the Prime Minister of Canada, but certainly the President of the United States has many responsibilities, and there are many issues. I can think of many geostrategic issues that the President is helping to lead on, and you can think of events most recently with respect to the Houthis and all the way through to trade and other aspects. So there's a wide range of issues to be discussed when we do connect. With respect to trade, I look forward to, at the appropriate time, having a discussion as two sovereign nations that is comprehensive, not targeted at one issue.
Okay, so I didn't realize Carney was a little bit retarded. Sorry. Like I feel, but like that was really tough to watch. Yeah, like, ooh, God.
Yeah, so
that's great. Not like, hey, look, I don't believe in a lot of liberal policy today, and I think that they're doing a lot to manipulate the media and manipulate people, and they've run this country into the ground objectively. So when I say that, why I think it's great is I don't necessarily want to see a guy crash and burn like that, but we need conservative government. We need this to happen, and they're getting a lot of momentum. So seeing him like this on the spot, then I put him up against Poilievre, there's no chance.
That's the thing, yeah. So a reporter asks you, what do you think your call with Donald Trump is going to entail? And then you stumble for 30 seconds, and then you go on about the Houthis.
Like what?
You've been campaigning like Trump is about to invade your country, and you're going to bring up the Houthis?
And you're the guy to deal with him. You're talking about, like, what?
Yeah, you need to have an answer there. So,
wow.
So hopefully, I don't know. I imagine that's what he's like on stage during one of these debates on
He'll
the
be a little
national
more
stage.
dialed
We'll
in, and
see.
they'll probably hand him the questions like they did Kamala, but at the same time, I still think Poilievre will eat his lunch, so we're good.
All right, moving on to our next story. We've got Mark Carney's chief of staff ignored CSIS warnings about Chinese election interference. Mark Carney's appointment of Marco Mendicino as chief of staff signals a continuation of Trudeau-era incompetence. Mendicino ignored multiple CSIS warnings about China's interference in Vancouver's 2022 mayoral election, despite receiving high-level intelligence briefings. CSIS had raised alarms for months, warning that Beijing mobilized Chinese-language media and community groups to install its preferred candidate. This follows a pattern of federal inaction on foreign election interference documented in the Hague Commission's finding on the 2019 and 2021 elections. Carney's government isn't a reset, it's the same failure to protect Canadian sovereignty while Beijing's influence operations continue unchecked. So, what does this say about Mark Carney's leadership, given his decision to keep Mendicino in a role?
I mean, it's a damning indictment of his leadership and a blatant disregard for Canadian sovereignty, really is what it is. I mean, Carney says that he's offering this fresh start, but he's doubling down on the same weak, spineless governance that basically led to this foreign interference in the first place. So, I mean, if you come in and you're going to change things up and you're offering people, this opportunity to rebuild the Liberal Party, and I know what the people want, and we're going to work our way back to the center, and this is going to be good for the country. You can't possibly hire the people that lit the place on fire. It doesn't make any sense. The arsonist can't be the firefighter.
Yeah, what's the number? It's like 84% of the same cabinet or something like that from Trudeau?
It's high. It's super high. Yeah. It's just, so when you look at that, I'm not sure if it's exactly that high, but it is high. Like I reported on it, and it's a lot of they're not just backbenchers, they're significant people, right? So I think they only highlighted 2 or 3 people that were key members that didn't come back, but they were not running they were not running again. So I think that had a lot to do with it. This is the easiest way for you to seem like, or at least appear as though you are a different government and a different leader and you're going to change things up. Because at the end of the day, think about it this way. If you are going to just call an election anyway, what the fuck does it matter who you put in place? It doesn't matter because everybody's seat's in trouble anyway. So you might as well put people in there that look good for you optically, not people that you think can do the job, even though this guy's this guy allowed the foreign interference and we know it. So strategically, this is so stupid.
Yeah, and this is the big piece that I think is missing from Poilievre's rhetoric right now, is all of this China interference. And that does make me question things a little bit, as being like, how much of a spine do you have if you're not willing to raise this? Again, I don't know. I also look at it from a political strategy perspective of going, okay, even if I understand that, say, China is a big threat to Canada, I can't really talk about this right now because then it weaponizes the entire Chinese diaspora against me, and then I won't get elected and I won't be able to even fix the problem. So I hope there's maybe some strategic aspect there, but the fact that he isn't bringing any of this up is a little concerning.
That's a good point. Yeah, it is a game of chess, and you and I don't get to see behind the curtain, that's for sure. But yeah, I mean, I'm on the same page as you. I think you should do something. I think that there's a way to tastefully bring it up, because even if you're trying to, if they're the ones that are supporting the Chinese anyway, you don't have the vote.
Right.
So it doesn't make any sense. You let the guy back in there, and this is what served them well the first time, second time, third time. The same thing anyway.
Yeah, and you already know, again, we saw even in the Liberal leadership election that China was running disinformation campaigns against Chrystia Freeland with WeChat and stuff. So they were sending out propaganda being like, don't vote for this one. Obviously trying to get, because they favor Carney.
Yes.
With his deep financial ties into China.
Right. So they're a lost vote anyway. 1.8 million Canadians.
So you already
Chinese
look at that and you go, okay, there's already going to be campaigns, propaganda campaigns from the Chinese media against you. So exactly.
So you know what? I think we kind of landed there. Just get guns a-blazing. Let's go.
But yeah, like even some of these numbers, he needs to be throwing these out. Like, okay, so while obviously Carney is still invested in Brookfield, even though he doesn't chair it anymore, but Brookfield's China investments include a $750 million stake in Shanghai real estate, hundreds of millions in China's renewable sector, and they also have a $300 million loan from the Bank of China secured after Carney met with top Chinese officials in Beijing.
I didn't even know that shit. That's wild.
So like he's got billions.
I only knew the mess here. That's bad.
So he's got billions upon billions of dollars intertwined with in China. And so you look at that and you go, yeah, how is this guy ever going to be expected to take any of China's threats seriously if they've got a hand on your money?
And you know what's interesting? So I was looking at Brookfield as like, okay, they have infrastructure projects and green energy projects in Canada. Now he's got the opportunity to accelerate these things, do more, make more money. Sure. And just for reference, he's got about $10 million. No, he's got about $5 or $6 million in deferred shares, but like another 30 million minimum. We don't know the exact number in options. So basically you can say he's got like 30 to 50 million in value in this company that we know of. Okay. So, but here's the problem. He said he was going to recuse himself from certain things. He said the other day, I'm going to recuse myself from conversations in these areas, like maybe green energy or maybe this or that. But he still won't disclose the asset structure. Okay. So that becomes a little more clear. You're not going to touch these things because you have maybe a conflict of interest that will come up during the election. But if you've got billions of dollars of assets in China, well, how deep is China in our entire country, diplomatically, militarily, from a corporate perspective, and organized crime? So they've got their tentacles in everything in this country. So $1 billion in their economy, and especially loans from their bank, well, now those funds are fungible. It doesn't matter where it almost doesn't matter what he's involved in. If they're involved in it, he's compromised and there's a conflict of interest.
Right. And this is why the whole blind trust thing is such a joke, because if you're sitting at the top of that, even if you don't know each individual, say, stock option that you're trading and whatever, all of this kind of stuff, you at least know a general idea as to where the majority of your investment lies.
Of course.
And this is actually
Plus, you're having lunch with Tim or having him up for the weekend once in a while so he tells you what's going on.
Yeah.
100%. I would do that.
And this is something that actually all of these, say, quote unquote, global elites have been forecasting for the last couple of decades. And this is why you're seeing this shift, is they believe that the economic center of gravity is the term they use. The economic center of gravity is shifting from North America to Asia.
Yes.
And so all of these people, they're looking at it as, it doesn't need to be, though. It doesn't have to.
No, but that's the path
these people,
we're on,
right?
For sure.
And I think these people they're just hedging their bets. They're just moving their money out of markets they're just moving their operations, right? And then they're also funding things like in our nations, being like, okay, well, we're deeply intertwined in their green energy projects, and then you know that the government that Carney was advising is investing into the projects. It's wild how much corruption, easily like millions of dollars, are being siphoned into there. But the whole point, it's just there's zero chance that Carney can have an objective dealings when it comes to Canada's economy when he's personally intertwined with all of these things. And yes, he may be able to say, I've got my assets in a blind trust, but he knows the overall scale of at least where things are going. Well, so he's not gonna poke the dragon, so to say.
Well, no, Brookfield Asset Management, I'm pretty sure you can get an idea of exactly the things that they're invested in just through public knowledge. So you can understand exactly what they're doing. It doesn't mean that you are controlling it, but you still know what's happening. You know the direction they're going. And like I said, there is no way a guy worth that much money, that's got that much on the line, does not have an inside track on what's happening. You absolutely know he does. He's getting the minutes from corporate meetings. You know he's talking to Tim on the weekends. He 100%. Oh, it's just Tim. We just play golf together. Oh, we just go shoot 18 holes, and he tells me everything that's going on. Mm-hmm. There's a 0% chance, and I hope Canadians don't fall for that shit.
Yeah, and actually it's telling if you look at Brookfield's assets by location. So the only place on this list, they've got America, Canada, Australia, Brazil, India, and Germany on this list, showing like the change over the years of how much Brookfield Asset Management has invested in each of these locations. Canada is the only place that they've actually been pulling their funds out of. Everywhere else, they're sinking more money into. And so you go, okay, under your direction, you were get my money out of this sinking ship. And you're going to sit here and say, that you're the man for this economy when you've been single-handedly pulling money out of it.
Yeah, I wonder what his MO is. Maybe to try to turn it around so it becomes a valuable asset for companies like his. That would make sense.
Yeah, or I also just think it's one of those things where when you're in these international networks and you're just playing at this point of, okay, well, I'm going to hop over to UK and I'm going to go run Canada for be their Bank of Canada.
Yeah.
And then I think that in this international network that you see aligned through things like the World Economic Forum, in these scenarios, I can just imagine that there's, say, a think tank that is going like, okay, how do we make sure we retain our influence over Canada?
Yes.
And they're just like, Carney, you're up.
Well, yeah, actually,
like you're the guy. You're the only guy that can do this.
That's a good point. So I was just thinking about this from a national perspective. Like, okay, what the hell is he going to do running Canada? Like, why even bother? You're under scrutiny. You've got all this money and blah blah blah. You got all the power anyway. You're already controlling the last guy pretty much, or one of the guys. So, but now if you think post national or beyond or international, transnational, whatever you want to say, from that perspective, these other countries may be leveraging a significant amount of value out of this country that he's invested into. So I was talking to Sam Cooper the other day on my show, and I asked him, I said, how much...
What show is that, Jonathan? When does it air?
Outspoken. Tuesdays at 9 p.m. I was talking to him about this, and he said, I asked him, I said, how much... Because we were talking about the Vancouver model, where they, in short, where organized crime takes money, launders it through casinos, puts it into real estate, and they manipulated the market. He was talking... So I ended up asking him, how much do they actually own? And he's like, well, now that I'm he's uncovering some stuff in Ontario right now. He goes, now that I'm uncovering this, he goes, trillions... with an S, trillions of dollars in value in real estate. I said, okay, what about beyond that? And he said, at least another trillion in business. I'm like, wait a minute. Our GDP is 2.7 trillion.
Yeah.
And you're telling me China's got $1 trillion in business annually right now in this country that they're leveraging, that they own, and that so guys, this is a huge problem. And so when you think about that, okay, I kind of, let that sink in for a second. And then you think about Carney's ties to China. So controlling Canada for him might be more of an international play. Like, hey, I need things to move here, not because I can extrapolate value from Canada for Canadians or for my Canadian corporations, but because of how I own or operate with these other nations, other corporations. So I don't know. I mean, that kind of starts to make a little more sense because there is a lot of value here. We're just not extrapolating it properly.
Well, exactly. You look at this and you go, okay, so yes, he comes in and makes sure that the status quo of what's been happening for the next 10 years continues,
yes,
which is more and more China infiltration and less American influence. Like, we need to make sure, just look at even what's going on with the Ukraine and Russia thing, right? You had, I can't remember which, it was a congressman or a senator, I can't remember who, but I think it was Lindsey Graham down in the States, who openly admitted we can't let Putin have all those resources and minerals in Ukraine. We need them. And so you go, you just want control over the natural resources 100%. In Ukraine. And so you're seeing this war as an investment. Whereas, okay, you take China and Canada for that and you go, yeah, it makes complete sense, especially when we've been talking, right? okay, it's so crazy how many pieces there are to this. So it's like China is getting more and more influence over our Aboriginal communities.
Yes.
We're giving more and more power to our Aboriginal communities to dictate when pipelines get approved.
The Mineral Tenures Act.
And then you've got guys coming in that are completely aligned with China and wanting to move that economic base over there. So they go, yeah, we're just coming in to protect our investment, essentially. That's
exactly what this looks like. I don't know. It's an interesting theory, but I think that's my guess. Let's see how it plays out.
I just want to touch on that one thing that you were talking about, how deep they are, though, and trillions of dollars and stuff. A good case study for this is Powell River, I think the city is called. It's about 45 minutes northwest of Vancouver and right along the coastline. And so this was one of those towns that had a manufacturing base, like a paper mill and that kind of stuff, that really kept the town alive. Like that's what the people did there. Mm-hmm. And it was going under. And then so the town ended up getting a whole bunch of Chinese investment in there to try to keep the town afloat. But what ended up happening was China just completely bought up the entire town. So, okay, first they buy the paper mill, and now they've got accesses to lumber supply chains and this kind of stuff, right? But then they bought up a research center along the coast. And now that's a crazy one, because you go, oh, why would they want a marine research center? And then you go, they have real-time data for the coastlines. Like if you ever wanted to invade, you would need to know exactly what the weather patterns are going to be. And you've got real-time data being sent back to the Chinese Communist Party all the time for that kind of stuff. Then they also bought up the airfield in it was an aviation school, I believe. But smart. They ended up teaching Chinese nationals flying lessons there. And you go, okay, I'm not saying it's all of them that it's just turned into this base, but I want to give some of my military pilots training. Now, go over here. We're going to give you some aviation classes in Canada. And now they've got real world firsthand experience flying in our terrain, in our weather patterns, in learning the lay of the land. We also saw, right, the Liberals allowed China to train to bring their military to train in our winters.
Yeah, in Petawawa.
Why?
Yeah.
What benefit does that do to us at all? Nothing.
No, it just gives them a leg up. Helps them understand how to fight in this terrain and this weather, this climate. Why?
And the only way that you can think about this is, like, China has openly stated that they want to overtake America as the dominant world superpower. They essentially want to have the global influence by 2050. How can any of this be happening if you know that they have an open stated policy of world domination, essentially, and you're like, yeah, all of these strategic aspects come right in.
The country's compromised. Mm-hmm. And I think, to wrap it up, with having, Mendocino back in there, knowing his involvement in foreign interference, or knowing of it and not disclosing it, the Liberal government appears to be at this point basically 100% in bed with China. And I think a good way to look at this, because the reason I think this is important is I think you don't make them seem like the only bad guy. So I think we live in a world where no matter who's in government, they are going to have to be allied with certain nations. That's how the world works now. Mm-hmm. So you have conservatives who look like they will align with America. You have liberals that clearly will align with China. And we know that that's the tug of war that's happening over our nation right now. Sure, we're always going to be aligned with Europe and stuff like that. But in terms of influence and power over our nation, those are the choices. So the reason I think this is important, and you and I will probably do some more work on this, is if you're voting for liberals, you are voting to have China deeply embedded in our country in every facet of it. And if you're voting for the conservatives, it's probably similar for Americans. Now, it may not be quite as pervasive, and it might take time for them. They might get there eventually, and it may be as big a problem. I don't know. But effectively, that's what you are doing. So I think it's important to understand that when you're voting for the leader of your country, I mean, we vote for MPs, but you know what I'm saying? When you're voting for the leading party of your country, consider the fact that there's more than one layer to this. It is that second big layer, which is post-national, which is which international group, which other country do I want to be in bed with? Because that's how this is shaking out.
Hey everyone, we hope you're enjoying this episode. If so, please consider leaving us a kind review wherever you're listening. If even just a quarter of our weekly audience did so, we'd instantly become one of the top-rated Canadian podcasts. We appreciate you helping us out, and now back to the show. All right, moving on to our next story. We've got China executes 4 Canadians. Liberal government responds with spineless diplomacy. China executed 4 Canadians this year, and Ottawa's response was weak rhetoric, with Global Affairs Canada merely strongly condemning the executions. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly refused to release details, citing privacy concerns, shielding the government from scrutiny. Beijing's history of using Canadian prisoners as political leverage, as seen with Robert Schellenberger and the 2 Michaels, continues, yet the Liberal government refuses to acknowledge the pattern. Meanwhile, tensions escalate with China imposing retaliatory trade measures. Mark Carney's government still clings to failed diplomacy, proving Canada is viewed as weak and spineless. When a government won't stand up for its people, its citizens pay the price. So why did the Liberal government respond with only rhetoric to China executing 4 Canadians?
See previous answer. I think y'all get it at this point. But when it comes down to, picking who you want to be in bed with, well, if you want to be in bed with China, just know that they'll execute Canadians as well. I think there's a couple things that I would touch on here. One is really they're spineless because I think we're so deeply in bed with them. I also don't think we have the mechanisms in place right now. We definitely don't have the military to really push back. But the thing is this shows you the amount of influence the CCP has over Canada, and in many other ways. If they can sit there and kill Canadians, and we just sit there and go, please stop. What position are we really in? And it's not a good one, right? I think that's really something to consider for people that are out there, considering voting for Liberals. Probably no one listening to us is, but you know what I mean. But I do want to touch on something else as well, because people will argue, well, they were dual citizens. They were also Chinese. Okay, well, Robert Schellenberg wasn't. He was only Canadian. And to bring people up to speed on this, Robert Schellenberg was moving drugs in China. He got caught in China. He was part of some drug ring. Okay, they gave him 15 years in jail. Sure, there are consequences for your actions. I'm totally cool with that. Now, in 2019, when Canada arrested Meng Wanzhou, she was, I believe, the CFO for Huawei. When that happened, and they did it to extradite her to the U.S. They did it as a favor to the United States. So back to Robert Schellenberg. The moment that they did that 15-year prison sentence went to the death penalty overnight. This guy got taken out, game over. So they've shown you time and time again, this is not a one-off, that when they don't like what you're doing, they're just going to kill Canadians just to prove a point, just to show you how little you are and how much control they have over you. So it's interesting. First, it is such a gutless, spineless reaction from the Liberal government to do nothing but say, can you please stop? We don't even know how many people are on death row over there. We know it's a reasonable number. We have no clue how many whatsoever. So that's kind of a piss off for me. Anyway, it gives you an understanding of just how much trouble we're really in with China. And it shows you that they're not the partner you want. This is not like, you don't see Americans murking Canadians. It's not above board.
Yeah, and so because I do see as well with the whole dual citizen thing, the fact that they were drug traffickers, I'm very much of the mind, like, play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
Yes.
You're dealing drugs in one of the most authoritarian nations on the planet. Like,
for sure.
Yeah, it's going to come around. However, the big point here isn't necessarily that I'm clutching pearls over the fact that these men were executed in China, because again, I think they were Chinese nationals that gained citizenship in Canada later. However, my point is that it's the complete hypocrisy on 2 fronts that I can think about with this that are major. Is okay, right? So Canada wants to launch a trade war and go toe to toe with Donald Trump in the American economy because of his tariffs. They don't do anything really in regards to the Chinese tariffs, maybe some slight, again, condemnation or whatever, but they don't take any hardline stance. They don't turn their propaganda machine against China. And so there's major hypocrisy on that front, where China is doing everything that you claim Trump is wrong for doing and more. Yes, and you're not doing anything.
To your point, though, I'll let you finish in a second, but that really, really magnifies the perspective that the Liberals are deeply in bed with China. Mm-hmm. And they're fighting hard back against Trump because they know that he's on the other team.
And then you also factor in, okay, what was the whole deal when Trudeau said that India carried out the hit on a Canadian citizen, right? They made it really, because this was the thing, is that it went like 2 weeks of that news story of India takes out hit on Canadian citizen on Canadian soil, yes, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then it didn't even dawn on me until like 2 weeks after that story was going around. So you know that the average person isn't getting this as well. The picture you get there is that it's like a Canadian-born citizen, but it was actually a newly immigrated person from India that was part of organized crime. In the Nijar fellow.
Yes.
He was part of the whole Khalistani movement. There's videos of him training with firearms and training other people with firearms. Also, Mocha Bazurgan has covered him in depth before. And from what the information that he's brought forward, what it looks like was that it was a Punjabi hit, two different types of Punjabi organized crime groups taking out one.
Yes.
And so you go, okay, they took that scenario, which was organized crime beef from across the world being killed in Canada, and Trudeau made a false claim, or at least hasn't backed it up with the actual evidence, because he said CSIS has information that India carried out this hit.
I'm just not telling anybody what it is.
But that information has never been released to the public. And we've also seen that he's lied, right? He said CSIS had information on conservatives being compromised by foreign influence, and then later the same commission that the Liberals held said there was no foreign influence.
Yes.
And he said that Jordan Peterson was paid by Russia, which he lied about under oath.
Yes.
And so you go, okay, so he, in all likelihood, lied about this as well, which caused us to completely cut diplomatic ties with India. We started expelling diplomats. They did the same.
Yeah.
It completely ruined our relationship with them over that. So again, just this shows the hypocrisy of going, and this is what's so interesting too, right? Is China and India are mortal enemies. They're constantly in conflict. They border each other. And so they really don't like each other. And okay, then you go, all right, yeah. Isn't that interesting, right? We've got our liberal government who is in bed with China, seemingly ramping up and trying to destabilize India and cut ties with India. That's interesting.
Was that the summit when Xi Jinping gave Trudeau a pee-pee slap? Was that the one?
Was that the one? What?
When he gave Trudeau a pee-pee slap, they were having a meeting and he just absolutely shredded him.
Oh yeah. I think that was about something, because it was that
Trudeau came out and said something he didn't want him to say in public.
Right.
And then
I can't remember what that was, but I just know that it was like Xi Jinping was like, I told you that in secret. And
you're not supposed to say anything. Yeah, so I know he got in trouble for that from Daddy. And then also with India, I remember Modi. He wasn't invited to certain dinners. He was picked up in a shitty car. His plane broke down. So I think a lot of that was like, hey, China wants me to do something to get back in their good books, but also I feel embarrassed from being in India because I was treated like a chump because I am a chump. And I think that's when he came back and then was just spouting off rhetoric about all that nonsense.
Right.
What a loser.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So you just go, okay. Yeah. Who is running our country? Is China running our country?
It seems that they are.
Yeah.
It seems like when you know, like their asset value here, the annual revenue that they're generating, we know their involvement in our elections. We know their involvement in organized crime. We know their involvement in military. Go ahead.
And just increasing for decades too. I want to make it clear that this isn't something that I'm saying like this happened over the last year. This has been like since the 80s and 90s.
Also corporate influence. They're also they own significant shares in oil, LNG, are also critical minerals. They're trying to take over the Arctic and what they're calling the Polar Silk Road. So this is very, very significant. It's pervasive. It's everywhere. And like you said, it's just getting worse. So based on what I'm seeing, I don't think there's any. You'd be very hard pressed to build a case to convince me that they're not.
Yeah, and this is why I think also too all this Russia interference stuff, whether it's say the CBC going off about those like a few of those Canadian commentators who were being like shadow funded by Russia, or they constantly try to tie Trump to Putin and all of this kind of stuff. I think that's just a massive red herring. Like, this is a communist tactic. It's really just an authoritarian tactic in general, but it's accuse the other person of doing what you're doing. And so they go, because in that way, again, you're on the defense. You're going, you're in bed with Russia. You're in bed with Russia. You're in bed with Russia. And you're so busy defending yourself that you can't be like, wait, you're in bed with China.
Yeah, it's that whole, no, you're stupid argument. You just you can't do it.
Yeah. Actually, I started reading this book as well by Peter Schweizer. It's called Red-Handed, and it's about China's influence, pretty much how they do the same thing in America.
Yeah.
But one of the things that he talked about there as well is that it's an official policy of the Chinese Communist Party for dealing with foreign nations. It's a thing. They say big help, little loudmouth, or big help, little badmouth. Sorry. And so what they mean by that is they give leeway to the people that they work with. They go, yeah, talk a little shit about our human rights abuses, but just make sure you're still helping us.
Interesting.
So it's like, yeah, you can say, condemn the fact that we killed Canadian citizens.
Sure.
Take a stance against it. But if you dare actually interfere with what we're doing.
Yeah, don't cross these lines. I guess it makes you seem less sympathetic and more like you can be like you're a legitimate adversary, so they're not quite as deeply involved.
Right.
But that's not the case.
All right, moving on to our next story. We've got the carbon tax charade, the Liberal bait and switch on climate policy. Mark Carney and the Liberals' decision to reduce the consumer carbon tax to zero is a deceptive bait and switch. Rather than eliminating carbon pricing, they are shifting the cost onto businesses, which will inevitably pass it on to consumers through higher prices, lower wages, or job losses. At the same time, Carney is pushing a carbon border adjustment mechanism, an import tax on countries without similar regulations, otherwise known as a tariff, despite criticizing Trump's. This move aligns with the net zero agenda, enforcing global economic control under the guise of climate policy. The policy shift is not about relief, but about advancing economic authoritarianism through ESG compliance. So, who benefits from Carney's carbon tax restructuring and who suffers the most?
Obviously, big corporations and global elite benefit the most, while everyday Canadians get screwed. I mean, it's pretty clear, right? The real winners would be these ESG, the ESG cartel, if you will, bureaucrats and every other corporate interest out there who profit from climate regulations. I mean, I think the biggest losers, of course, are going to be working class Canadians who, like you said, are going to be paying higher prices, losing jobs, and already can't afford groceries and gas and rent and to live in this stupid country right now. So this isn't about climate change. That's what I want people to really take from this isn't about climate change. It's about economic control.
So I think that this whole net zero thing is really just their justification. It's the modern justification in the West for a command economy. So a command economy is what was known as, like in these totalitarian countries, completely state organized, right?
Yes.
Whether it was the Soviet Union under Marxism and socialism, or whether it was Nazi Germany through their command economy. The only real difference there was the justification they used for complete state control of the economy, but it functioned very similarly. So, for instance, the Germans said that the economy has to serve the Aryan race, right? Whereas
That's wild.
Right. So everything had to go, you had to, just like the DEI policies, you had to hire a certain identity group right into these
interesting.
groups.
Okay, yeah.
You had to, we have to tax these people more and give more money welfare to these people, all of this kind of
course,
stuff.
yeah.
So they used the Aryan race as the justification for that. Then in the Soviet Union, they used the proletariat class. So they said everything that our economy needs to do is to serve the proletariat class because we're working towards equality.
Yes.
And so, it's the exact same in the sense where the state just ends up having complete control. And then you look at the net zero stuff and they go, all right, just everything has to be about the climate. And even Carney himself said, we have a opportunity in regards to the COP26 climate change conference. He said, we have an opportunity to make climate change at the heart of every financial decision. That's a very telling statement because he's not just saying we should consider how our financial decisions affect the environment.
Yes.
He's saying that climate change should be at the heart,
Yes.
the very center of every... And again, you know that too. Like, we know this. We think about what we're going to say online and all of these kind of things. You're very specific with your words and in framing things in a certain way. Obviously, on the podcast, it's not that because it's a little bit more natural. But when you're doing like an announcement, 100% it's word by word. So he was writing that into a speech. And so, those words were deliberate choices to be like at the heart of every financial decision needs to be climate.
So what's interesting about that is like the COP26 was in 2021. And this is when they were giving the big push for the GFAN stuff, the big green energy project that was controlling nearly $100 trillion. Is that how much it was? Like that $130 trillion commitment. That fell apart. Now all the banks bailed, American banks, Canadian banks. That's just kind of fizzled out. But it's also around the time he joined Brookfield. So it's interesting to note, like he's pushing this like this ideology of, hey, this is the solution. But what he's trying to do is he's trying to create a bank for himself. He goes, well, it's kind of like, hey, if I'm the only one selling shovels, I'm going to tell you that there's gold over there. And then everybody buys all my shovels. So he's like, okay, I'm deeply invested in this green energy project. We're going to push G-fans. I'm in Brookfield. We do all this green infrastructure stuff, whatever it is, green energy and infrastructure rather. So I need to push the world towards, we have this opportunity. There's gold over there, and I got all the shovels. Mm-hmm. So that's what it was. It was all about self-interest. Now, the one thing that I hope is that because all those banks bailed out of the G-fan stuff, everybody seems to be turning their back on a lot of that green agenda. It's my hope that that is the sign, maybe not necessarily that he needs, because I think he'll still work towards the self-interest, but that the people that are helping make decisions in this country that help move the needle see, okay, this is not working anymore. I don't know that that's going to happen. And obviously he's implementing these new carbon taxes. But I'm hopeful that it's enough of a sign to people that can move things around, can vote him out, have the power to actually get rid of this guy, see that, hey, look, he's just serving himself with these things. It's fallen apart. This isn't good for Canadians. It didn't work at scale. It's not working for the world. We have to move on from this. So I don't know. I'm hopeful, I guess.
So I do think that when it comes to that G-fans and falling apart with even the Canadian banks pulling out of it and all of this kind of stuff.
Four of the 5 big banks pulled.
For what the Global Financial Alliance for Net Zero was yes, it was all these different institutional investors like Brookfield, like BlackRock, like these big banks and all of this kind of stuff. They were getting together to say, okay, we are going to make sure that we're only investing in certain projects or like, okay, we're going to make sure that all companies now have an ESG score, and that ESG score will then depend on whether we invest in those companies or not. Again, command economy, right? Like every decision is made through this lens. Everything has you can't even start a business unless you're on board with our ESG policies.
Yes.
So I do think that maybe some of it, and maybe I'm just trying to tie too many strings here together. I don't know, but it's very interesting that right around the same time that Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero fell apart was right around the same time that the House of Representatives Judiciary Committee released a report about the sustainability shakedown, how a climate cartel of money managers colluded to take over the board of America's largest energy company. And so it was showing how these people were, it was ExxonMobil, how they were using this financial leverage to pressure ExxonMobil into limiting the supply of oil in America to drive up prices. And then their goal was, okay, we're going to, by driving up prices of energy, people will consume less of it. Therefore, there's less emissions.
Yes.
That's global market fixing.
Yes.
That's like a major financial crime. And so when I think, at least I'm seeing this, that alliance fell apart eerily around the same time that this report came out detailing how they were doing this.
Right.
And so I think it was also like going, oh shit, like there might be some legal pressure against what we're doing now in the future with the Trump administration coming in.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, this is all about sort of centralizing more power and more resources towards a few people. That's what it seems like the green agenda and Carney's agenda appears to be in general.
Moving on to our next story, we've got Trudeau's $8.4 million pension, a call for accountability in political compensation. Justin Trudeau is set to receive $8.4 million in taxpayer-funded pensions, despite leading Canada through soaring deficits, declining affordability, and economic stagnation. His MP pension alone will reach $6.5 million if he lives to 90, while a special prime ministerial pension adds $1.9 million more. Over his tenure, he has already earned $3.5 million in salary. All said and done, he will have taken roughly $12 million from the Canadian taxpayers. Yet there are no performance metrics tied to these pensions. Politicians are rewarded regardless of their failures. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is calling for an end to unearned lifetime pensions. So, should politicians be subjected to key performance indicators before taxpayers fund their retirements? And if so, what should those KPIs be?
Yeah, absolutely they should. This is ridiculous. I mean, in any real job, if you rack up massive debt, tank affordability, and leave the economy in shambles, you don't get a golden parachute. You get fired before you get your pension. You're gone. But in politics, for some reason, failure is rewarded with a lifetime pension funded by struggling taxpayers. I don't really understand it. I mean, this $8.4 million is really just a slap in the face to Canadians. So if you want to talk about KPIs, I would say Did you balance the budget? Did you improve affordability? Did you deliver any of the results that you said you would? It's like, hey, on day one, you set your goals. Did you accomplish anything? Or did you just make life worse across the entire board? It's the latter, unfortunately, right? Now, I think a good way to do this would be to actually set some objective KPIs for leadership. Like there has to be a way that you can make room for things like extenuating circumstances, like a pandemic, for example. I don't mind, or a war. Super, super cool with that. This can be a moving target, but there should be some objective nature to this. Otherwise, you're just writing a blank check for politicians who basically leave the country worse off than they found it. And unfortunately, that just seems to be the case. So for me, bit of a hard pill to swallow. I think we should put something in place.
Yeah, for sure. I think there is easily measurable ones, such as, did per capita GDP keep pace with cost of living?
Yes.
Like if inflation is going up faster than per capita GDP and people's earnings, then just right off the bat, no, you don't get to profit if people are making less. Then also, I do think crime should be one of those. Like, is violent crime worse or better? If it's gotten worse under your control, nope. Sorry, don't get money.
Yeah.
Like you're making people's lives more dangerous. And then, balanced budgets. It's like, are you putting debt on the back of future generations? Then
It's such an easy country to run too. My God, by comparison, like I broke down our budget the other day. Our all levels of government consume about $1.2 trillion of money. So about just under 45% of our entire GDP at 2.7 trillion. So those are like last year's numbers, but it holds pretty true. And it's like we're just lighting so much. We're lighting half of it on fire. And we're still running a deficit. I mean, this may sound crazy to people, but like, it's actually not that difficult. We don't have that many big ticket items. We're just doing a really, really bad job of managing our finances from the top all the way down. And don't get me wrong, there be some municipalities that are doing a good job. And yes, Alberta's doing a reasonable job. And I think Nova Scotia, if I remember correctly, had a reasonable surplus. So not everybody sucks. Don't get me wrong. This is just kind of at scale. We just have really, really bad systems in place and really bad programs that we have to stop trying to repair and just overhaul them completely. Build parallel systems. And I honestly think if you did that, you'd save this country a ton of money. And honestly, you got to reduce the size of public service. This is ridiculous. So I don't know. For me, I don't think it's all that hard. And I think some KPIs would do this country good. Even if for nothing else, then to understand, the value of the person that got in and how valuable the party is. Because, you sit here going into an election. And this is all subjective nonsense because you have one party that controls the entire media, right? And again, we know it's pretty much nationalized. So they can say whatever they want. They don't have to answer to anybody. They can literally say anything they want, and that becomes gospel to a lot of Canadians. So when you consider that, it's kind of like, how do we have a fair and decent democracy if you can lie to everybody and I don't get to have a voice? That's not very fair. Okay, but cool, that's the system. Right, okay. But if we did have some objective metrics, okay, well, while you were in power for the last 10 years, here's the things that happened. You did not check any of these 25 boxes, or you checked 2 of them. Obviously, this individual and this party are failing miserably, and we need to vote them out. So I think what it does is it takes away the value of propaganda on its own, because you can still use propaganda and still convince them that you're a new leader and you're going to change things, that you're the right guy or girl for the job. Sure, but if your party basically at 2 of 25 had an 8% efficiency and accomplishment, well, now Canadians, it doesn't matter what kind of rhetoric you give me, Canadians can kind of vote from a more objective position, which I really think would be beneficial to the country.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense, but that's probably why we don't do it, because we don't
100%.
do things. We don't do things
like,
that make sense.
Oh, that would work? No, we're not going to do that.
But yeah, like the fact that we aren't one of the richest countries in the world, when you look at the ratio between how much resources in land we have,
yes,
compared to the amount of people, obviously, a lot of our land, like you're not going to go find all of a sudden start major cities up in Nunavut and stuff.
It's not overly habitable, but it has
your
resources.
Exactly. And so even you look at something like, for instance, Norway's sovereign wealth fund, which has over $1.5 trillion in U.S. assets. But what they do with that is they invest money that is made from the resources, mainly oil in Norway, into this fund that is then managed. And so here's a great example of how they would use it. So if you have a issue like when Trump's tariffs come along, they sell off some of their stock to fund their public spending. So
Yes.
they're using profits off of their fund to up their spending when they need to, and they might not necessarily have it from tax revenue.
Yeah, so this is the importance of this is you don't have to print money.
Exactly.
And you don't have to increase taxes. So you don't have to put hurt on the economy in two different ways, which is exactly what happens here.
But we don't have anything like that.
No,
here.
of course
And
not.
so-
We just print money and we cause inflation, which causes these interest spikes and also the nonsense, or we raise taxes, which makes it harder to afford life, which the inflation already did to begin with.
Yeah.
Very broken system. Yeah, that's actually a great idea too.
All right. Moving on to our last story of the day, we've got free speech, free thought, free lives. John Stuart Mill's vision for liberty. So John Stuart Mill was a British philosopher, political economist, and one of the most influential thinkers of classic liberalism. He became a leading advocate for individual liberty, free speech, and utilitarianism. His seminal work, On Liberty, argues for the protection of personal freedoms against government and societal overreach. Mill also contributed significantly to political economy, emphasizing the importance of free markets and representative democracy. His ideas continue to shape modern debates on liberty and governance. So it is just funny to me looking back at some of these old, like, foundational liberal thinkers. And this is a perfect example of what you were talking about earlier, where, you know, Rogan was a leftist. I considered myself a liberal most of my growing up.
Yeah.
Even too, like, I look back and read the foundational liberal thinkers. Like, for instance, John Stuart Mill was a very influential philosopher on the founding fathers of America. There was a few of them. John Locke was another one, and Thomas Paine. But there was like a couple of these thinkers that America was essentially being like, let's put these ideas like fully into action.
Yes.
This like liberty ideas. But anyways, he took in his book On Liberty, he outlined essentially 3 points that he thinks a society requires for it to be considered free. So he's and I boiled it down, so this isn't verbatim, but I just made it a little shorter and more modern. True liberty covers 3 essential areas. First, freedom of thought and conscience, the right to hold, express, and debate opinions on any topic, whether scientific, moral, or religious. The freedom to speak and publish ideas is just as crucial as restricting expression inevitably undermines thought itself. Second, freedom of lifestyle and personal choice. The right to live according to one's own values as long as it does not harm someone else. Others may disagree, but that alone doesn't justify interference. Third, freedom of association. The right to unite with others for any purpose that doesn't infringe on others' rights. A society that fails to uphold these freedoms is not truly free. The only meaningful liberty is the ability to pursue one's own well-being without obstructing others from doing the same. People flourish most when they are free to live as they see fit, rather than being forced to conform to others' expectations. So, how do Mill's ideas on liberty compare to modern democratic values? Are we upholding his vision?
So obviously modern democratic values, they sort of claim to uphold Mill's vision of liberty rather, but in practice they fall short. So I actually kind of wrote something, so I didn't want to miss anything here. So free speech is increasingly under attack, with censorship disguised as misinformation, while control and social consequences are in place for expressing rather unpopular opinions. Governments and tech platforms regularly suppress dissent, contradicting Mill's belief that open debate strengthens society. Personal freedom is also eroding. Bureaucratic overreach dictates how people live, from excessive regulations on businesses to intrusive policies on individual choices. The idea that harm justifies government intervention has been stretched beyond reason and used to justify everything from speech restrictions to lifestyle mandates. Freedom of association is similarly under threat as governments crack down on protests, dissidents, and groups that challenge the prevailing narrative. So whether through debanking, selective law enforcement, or pressure campaigns, dissenters are increasingly punished. Mill envisioned a society where individuals could freely think, speak, and live as they chose, as long as they didn't infringe on others' rights. Today's democracies very much pay lip service to this idea, but frequently violate it under the guise of safety, inclusivity, or stability. So his vision remains a powerful benchmark, but it's one that modern governments are definitely failing to meet.
It's interesting to me to see how the very concept of rights have been weaponized against us in order to take them away. You know, for instance, it's giving more and more group rights in order to infringe on individual rights, right? So like even, okay, in the individual right of freedom of thought and conscience, which also extends to speech, is being infringed upon in the name of, say, transgender rights.
Sure.
And you go, so you're giving a very select few the power to dictate what all must have to say.
Yes.
Right? With Bill C-16 and stuff, how they, and, you know, people love to point to the fact where there's just like, well, nobody's been imprisoned for that yet. And you go, yeah, but the legislation is right there ready to be used, which is that misgendering is a hate crime.
Yes.
So like that's a very interesting concept to me about how liberalism has been weaponized against us in the sense too. It's like
not really
it's
liberalism anymore. That's
exactly.
the problem. It's just wearing it's got liberal lipstick on. Otherwise, it's not.
It's Orwellian doublethink, just like
Yes.
how he said, you know, war is peace, ignorance is strength, freedom is slavery. It's like authoritarianism is liberalism.
Yes.
Is like how it's being pitched now, and it sucks because I don't know, in every sense of the word, almost I'm still a liberal. And when I look back at it, but yeah, just the entire movement has been completely hijacked. Another thing that I think is interesting when it comes to, say, the concept of individual rights, and this is a little bit different from even what anything Mill would have been talking about, because again, I don't think he could have even predicted how crazy society would get. But you look at something like, okay, I don't even necessarily disagree that if somebody wants to get on hormone blockers, I think it's a terrible decision. But like, hey, if you're an adult and that's your decision,
If you're an adult,
go ahead. Yeah,
100%.
If you're
Yes.
an adult. That being said, I think there's also another line here, which is that just because you have a right to take hormone blockers if you want to, doesn't mean that that should be publicly funded. And that's where we've gotten to now, right?
not.
Where it's just
and
like,
then I should have to call you something that you're not.
well, yeah, and we're seeing this, right, where the military is, being expected to fund the sex changes of soldiers or this or
That
even
is
public.
so
even-
ridiculous.
Right. And so I go, yeah, you might have a right to do things, but you don't have a right to demand that resources are directed
That you
to
can do
that.
it on my dime. And we've had this happen multiple times where they're I've seen them use provincial funds here multiple times for weird sex change stuff. I'm like,
Right.
what's happening?
Like I
What are we
think that
doing?
I think that is put in the same boat as, say, plastic surgery. It's like nobody in their right mind would think that I need to pay for the lip injections of a girl on King Street, downtown
No.
Toronto. Like, but that's essentially how I view things like, say, sex changes. It's just
100%.
it's just far more invasive.
Yes.
But it's like this is an elective surgery.
Yeah. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Right. And but people will say if you take that stance and you go, yeah, I don't want to fund any of that. Like the public shouldn't have to be on the hook for
Right, right.
your identity crisis. Even if you take that stance, people will say you're infringing on trans rights. And again, so it's this concept that rights get weaponized against you.
This is the stupid conversation we have with people all the time. And I've been having it ever since Trump pulled the gender stuff. He pulled it out of government. He took it out of government hands and government documents. It doesn't mean you can't pretend you're a giraffe and that you can go cut your dick off. You can do whatever you want. And if you hang out with people that think that's cool and will call you a giraffe and applaud you for cutting your dick off, hey, maybe you're with the right group of people. That's fine. He's not saying you can't do that. What he's saying is the government has no place in this space. Same thing here, man. This has nothing to do with hating anybody or trans rights in terms of like that you should be able to go live as whoever you want. I don't care. As long as you're an adult, have at her, bro. Go nuts. I don't give a shit. But it shouldn't be publicly funded, and it shouldn't be the responsibility of the government to enforce these ridiculous rules on people. I really get cheesed off with the compelled speech stuff. That's really, really hard for me. Like
that's my line. Like that's
Yeah.
a line of war.
And now well, the thing is because it's such a slippery slope, right? And it's just crazy that like, no, I'm not buying into your delusion. No, like you can't have a baby. I don't care if you think you're a woman. That's fine. Go do whatever you want to do in your own time. Again, I do not care. The government should have nothing to do with it whatsoever. It's insane.
All right. Anything else you wanted to add before we get out of here?
No, that was a weird way to finish. Go democracy. No, I'm good.
All right. Don't forget to head over to our Substack where you can sign up for our newsletter, which goes out completely free 5 days a week. If you would like to support the show, you can sign up as a subscriber and help keep this engine going. Also, we do have the Death by Taxes hoodies, which are available at blendrnews.com. That's BLENDR news.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next week.
Bye, everybody.